Somalia's new president has made clear his priority in office, to drive out al-Shabaab. And this was his message earlier this month.
Our plan is to eliminate the militant group from all its strongholds. We have done it before, and I'm confident that we will achieve it again.
He's relying on help from the White House. America's President Donald Trump has also made al-Shabaab a target and is to deploy troops and widen the mandate for US airstrikes. But that's creating concerns among Somalia's humanitarian partners. More than half the population needs food aid, more than 6 million people. Aid agencies already are overstretched, and they say an offensive could make their work even tougher. The United Nations humanitarian coordinator Peter de Klerk says now is not the time for military action, and that relief work must take priority. But the government says an offensive will weaken al-Shabaab's grip in hard-hit areas such as Bakol in the southwest and open up supply routes for aid. The government in Mogadishu argues that its top priority for now is to save lives and is seeking international support in averting a possible famine, but says its main target is to eliminate the militant group al-Shabaab in the next 2 years. Abdulaziz, Billow, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, let's bring you more on the situation in Somalia. I'm joined now by CGTN's Abdulaziz Billow in Mogadishu, as well as Kate Fisher in Washington. Abdulaziz, let's start with you. To begin with, perhaps just paint the picture for us of what it takes to get relief aid through to regions that are still under al-Shabaab control, and how any further escalation of military action might affect this.
Well, indeed, it's absolutely impossible for any Western organization or the United Nations or even some local Somali non-governmental organizations. They don't have the privilege to move in al-Shabaab controlled areas. The al-Shabaab has banned all UN and Western NGOs from operating in their region, and they've continued to abduct officials working with local aid agencies on the ground, hampering the efforts of the aid delivery in the worst affected areas. And these areas, some of these areas are under their blockade, so they've definitely had a big impact rather on the humanitarian efforts that is ongoing here on the ground. So definitely it's quite impossible for aid to be delivered to these regions. And also the UN, they do estimates, they move to drought-stricken areas to do their surveys so that they can be able to know the exact population that is in need. And if they're not able to go to al-Shabaab controlled areas, then definitely it's a big problem because they cannot estimate the needs on the ground there. And in some parts of the country like southwest, in a place called Bakol, the al-Shabaab has blockaded key supply routes there. The only way to reach that place is through airplanes. So it's quite costly also for the United Nations to do surveys using airplanes all the time. But the government here is of the view that the only way to end the recurrent drought crisis in the country is by creating a stable, secure environment here on the ground. In 2011, when Somalia lost 250,000 people, Lindy, so al-Shabaab controlled the vast south-central region. So the government is of the view that there shouldn't be a repeat of the 2011 crisis that happened here in Somalia, and the president is of the view that an offensive is imminent right now, despite concerns from the UN that it might halt the delivery of aid in some of the drought-stricken areas. But for now, just recovery efforts are on the ground in al-Shabaab controlled areas. The government here and the NGOs are relying on the business community in some of the al-Shabaab controlled areas so that they can be able to give food to the drought-stricken people, and they're using cash handouts, using mobile banking to some of the affected areas. Lindy.
Well, Kate, let's bring you in here now. As you heard Abdulaziz say there just a moment ago, it is almost impossible for aid agencies to deliver assistance or relief to communities that are under al-Shabaab control. And of course, this now makes the UN's appeal very logical and very sensible. But what is the United States' response, considering that the Trump administration has just recently deployed troops to Somalia to help fight al-Shabaab?
Yes, so I've been speaking to both the State Department and the Department of Defense here in Washington today, and the State Department says it is deeply concerned about the threat of famine in Somalia, and in response it is scaling up its help in terms of food, malnutrition treatments, sanitation, clean drinking water, etc. So it is well aware, it says, of the concerns about a famine. But on the other hand, although it also says, yes, the Trump administration has now given the military new authorities, if you like, to take military action in Somalia, they point out, the Department of Defense points out that these actions have been, these authorities have been with them for several weeks now, yet they still haven't acted upon it. That is because they say they take it very, very seriously and they only want to act very carefully. They still, they say, are developing their intelligence and their picture of what is happening on the ground, and they say they will continue to do that, and it will not be until they're absolutely certain of what they're doing before they make any action. The head, the general who is head of the US Africa Command, saying that it is very, very important, to use two verys, and that he had a very, very high bar of certainty before any kind of military action would be taken in Somalia. However, he said he did look forward to using that military action when the time was right in the future.
Well, a cautious approach there from the United States. Abdulaziz, do you think that Somali authorities will respond similarly to the US and only use military action if necessary, considering the UN's appeal to delay these planned military efforts against al-Shabaab?
Well, definitely, Lindy, the authorities here in Mogadishu, once they issued the warning that they're going to launch an imminent war on the al-Shabaab, definitely, according to reports and according to the information minister, is that Mogadishu was doing this offensive in close consultation with Washington. So definitely the African Union forces here in Somalia also gave assurance to the president upon his election earlier in March that they are going to help him deliver on his promise. One of his campaign pledges was that he was going to eradicate the militant group al-Shabaab, and President Farmajo said that he's going to accomplish all this in the next 2 years. So definitely, Lindy, according to experts here on the ground, is that Somali authorities will have to weigh their options. In areas that humanitarian assistance is of top priority, then definitely they're going to delay their offensive in those particular areas. But then again, the al-Shabaab is a general threat here in Somalia. It has continued to attack the UN bases itself here, and the UN has been of the view that the government and also the international partners need to create a stable environment for humanitarian workers to be able to operate here in the country. So most of this offensive definitely will have an impact on the humanitarian aspect. If the regions that have been blockaded by al-Shabaab will be finally liberated, then it will be easy flow for the UN to send in trucks of UNWFP products and also food to the malnutrition victims there in some of these areas. So definitely the government here is of the view that the offensive should be imminent, and it's timely because they don't want a repeat of whatever happened here in Somalia in 2011. And of course, in the past few weeks, the militant group has launched brazen attacks here in the capital, Mogadishu, following the calls by the president of an imminent attack. They also targeted the head of the Somali National Army. So definitely all these factors are the main reasons as to why the government is of the view that a military approach should be the right move right now, despite the humanitarian concerns.
Well, indeed, a very difficult balancing act. But Kate, let's return to you just with one last thing. Of course, we're also following reports from the US Africa Command on the spike in piracy incidents off the Somali coast. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's right. Secretary of Defense Mattis yesterday confirming there had been an uptick in the number of piracy incidents off the coast of Somalia in the last 8 weeks. He said around half a dozen pirate attacks had happened, which is an increase because they had kind of got on top of this problem before. He said he believes it is the drought and famine in the country that has caused this, because the ships that were targeted were carrying oil and food. He also said these were of a small stature, these ships, and therefore made a lucrative target for pirates. Secretary of Defense Mattis saying he doesn't see a US military role in fighting these pirates as yet. He believes that the commercial shipping companies need to increase security once again and make sure that their security standards haven't lapsed since the piracy issue kind of died down a little. There's concern that perhaps people didn't have as much security as they once were. He said that needs to increase once again to try to nip this in the bud. But at the moment, the US doesn't see any military role in trying to curb piracy off the coast.
All right, well, thanks very much for that update. Kate Fisher in Washington and Abdulaziz Billow joining us a little earlier from Mogadishu.